Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. No battles. No kings. No empires crumbling under their own weight. Just a quiet moment in the ancient world, under a soft velvet sky, beside the slow, endless breathing of the Nile. You're standing barefoot on the cool stone floor of a modest mud brick home. Outside, the air hums with night frogs, but inside, it's silent, save for the crackle of an oil lamp. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a heavy cotton sheet. This is where our journey begins. We're not here for pharaohs tonight. We're here for her, the woman sitting on a low stool, elbows on her knees, staring into that flickering flame like it might blink first. She's not a queen. She's not a priestess. She's someone the scribes forgot to name. But she's thinking about leaving her husband. And in her world, astonishingly, she just might be allowed to. Oh, and you? You probably wouldn't last 2 hours here. The food is suspicious, the bugs are judgmental, and privacy means hoping no goats walk in on your arguments. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, what time is it where you are? Drop your city and hour down in the comments. I promise, someone else out there is wide awake with you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through a thin linen curtain. Inside is a simple room, the scent of baked earth mixing with the faint sweetness of oil from the lamp. The walls are painted in worn murals, fish leaping from water, lotus blossoms as wide as your hand. On a low shelf, a clay jar, a coiled rope, a straw doll. But what draws your eye is the box. A modest one, made of acacia wood. It's shut. The woman is there. No name, no title. But her eyes carry the weight of a story. In her hand, a rolled papyrus scroll, not a prayer, not a spell. A contract. She's married. But tonight she's thinking of ending it. What brought her here? Did something terrible happen? Or was it quieter than that, just years of distance, of drying up conversations, of two people walking parallel lives? You leave her there in the lamp's flicker and step out into the night. No street lights, just the glitter of the Milky Way spilled across the sky. You walk slowly along a stone path. Down the way, neighbors are murmuring over sour beer. One woman whispers, "She's going to leave him." Another shrugs. "Well, she has the right to, doesn't she?" Yes, they're talking about divorce. The year is 1200 BC. You keep walking down to the river's edge, where her husband works. A wiry man casting nets into black water. He has no idea his wife is thinking of leaving. There's no cruelty here, no dramatic betrayal, just distance. You feel it in the air between them. In ancient Egypt, marriage wasn't sanctioned by temples or the crown. It was a civil contract. You find yourself inside a small shrine used for writing legal documents. Along the walls are scenes etched in ink, people dividing sheep, arguing over bread, shaking hands over marriage, and over its end. You notice something odd. In several of these contracts, the woman keeps her property. She can leave if trust is broken, if care is absent. It feels startlingly modern. She doesn't need a priest's permission. Just a reason, and the strength to walk away. Was it education that made this possible? You're now sitting beside a group of children learning to write on broken potsherds. Among them, girls. That alone sets Egypt apart from so many of its ancient peers. Here, girls could learn to read, could become scribes, doctors, landowners. You catch glimpses of women in history, Peshet, a female physician from Thebes. A brewery run by a woman and her daughters. A priestess who oversaw temple accounts and rituals. These weren't anomalies, they were accepted. This economic and intellectual independence gave women the tools to stand on equal ground in court and at home. Still, historians debate. Some scholars argue this independence only applied to wealthy urban women, not rural peasants. Did the common wife in a farming village really have power? Or are we just reading elite exceptions? You see evidence of both. A noblewoman could hire a scribe to draft her divorce petition. A poor woman? She might just walk out, tell the village council, and take her pots and kids with her. The law may have been uneven, but the cultural space to act? It existed. You return to that quiet room. She's still there, the scroll still unopened in her hand. The lamp sputters once. She hasn't made a decision. But she knows, if she chooses to go, no one will stop her. No need to fake her death, no need to vanish in the night. A right that women in many parts of the world wouldn't see for thousands of years. You shiver, not from cold, but from awe. This calm space holds something potent, choice. You sit beside her. Say nothing. Just listen. To her breath. To the lamp's gentle hiss. To time itself moving like the Nile. And you realize, this isn't just a story of one wife. It's the first ripple in a long river, toward autonomy, toward voice, toward being seen. You're up before dawn, stirred by the faint sound of sandals scraping packed dirt, and the distant clatter of ceramic cups. The air smells of morning Nile mist, and the faint acrid burn of yesterday's cooking fire. You stretch your limbs on a straw mat that never quite got soft, and rise with the village. You follow the woman from last night. She's walking now, quietly, steadily, through a narrow alley between mud brick homes. A cat darts across her path. Somewhere behind her, a baby starts to cry. She doesn't pause. She's going to visit her father. Not because she needs permission, but because this is how things are done. Divorce in ancient Egypt wasn't a dramatic courtroom showdown. It started, most often, with a conversation over lentils and barley beer. You duck beneath a hanging reed curtain and enter a courtyard shaded by palm fronds. Her father is seated on a low stool, peeling garlic with one long thumbnail. He looks up, nods once, and says nothing. You sit beside them as she begins, plainly, steadily. I don't want to stay with him anymore. He doesn't argue. He doesn't shout. He just sighs and says, "Then we'll find someone to write it properly." You're watching the beginning of a divorce, 1,400 years before the birth of Rome. There's no scandal. No exile. No branded scarlet letter. This is how it often began for women in ancient Egypt, inside modest homes, at humble tables, with practical talk about goats, jewelry, and where the kids will sleep. And that's your first real surprise, how unremarkable it is. You'd expect torches, drama, betrayal. But what you get is barley bread and a list of items to be divided. She's not a noblewoman. She's not rich. She's a wife of a fisherman. He's not cruel, not kind, just tired. They've grown apart. He spends his days mending nets and swearing at river reeds. She spends hers washing clothes and imagining other lives. There was no wedding ceremony with rings and white dresses. Their marriage began when they agreed to share a home, food, and responsibility. And now, with equal quiet, it can end. But they do need someone to make it official. That's where the scribe comes in. You follow her to the marketplace, where a lean man with inky fingers and a reed pen tucked behind his ear sits cross-legged beneath an awning. He's the community scribe, think lawyer, notary, and therapist all rolled into one. She explains her decision. He nods and starts to write. If it comes to pass that I no longer desire to be with my husband, I shall depart freely, taking with me that which I brought, and what is mine, and that which we agree. The phrasing is simple. But the implications? Huge. She gets her jewelry back. Her cooking pot. The blanket woven by her grandmother. And most importantly, her freedom. What's strange here is how ordinary it feels. The scribe doesn't flinch. The crowd nearby doesn't whisper. No one treats her as a scandal. In fact, the woman just before her was filing a property dispute over chickens. The one after her? Asking to confirm a contract for land inheritance. Divorce, it turns out, is just part of life here. Not frequent. Not shameful. Just possible. You glance at the papyrus as the ink dries. There's no need for a reason. She doesn't have to prove abuse, infidelity, or abandonment. If she wants to leave, she can. No one asks her to prove she deserves it. Now pause. Because that's not just rare. It's revolutionary. Historians still debate how widespread this freedom truly was. Some argue this was only true in certain regions, perhaps around Thebes and Memphis, where legal traditions were better preserved. Others suggest it was only possible for literate women, or those with powerful families. And then there are the stories that say, no, this was normal. Expected. Women could own land, sue for damages, and yes, leave a marriage on their own terms. You're sitting right there in that contradiction. The law and the lived experience, two halves of a papyrus scroll never fully aligned. But either way, she's doing it. And not just walking away, walking forward. Back home, the woman gathers her things. She wraps her jewelry in a linen scarf. Ties up her clothes in a satchel. She takes her son's toy hippo carved from blue faience. He'll be staying with her. The neighbors watch. One woman offers to help. Another glares. A third shrugs. She'll be back, she says. They always come back. You and I both know that's not true. Some women did go back. Some didn't. The important part? It was their call. And this one? She's not looking back. She spends her first night alone in her uncle's storehouse. It smells like grain and dust and the memory of wet clay. You lie awake beside her, listening to the soft scurry of mice in the thatch. It's not glamorous. Not cozy. But it's hers. In the morning, she'll walk to the edge of the village to check on a small plot of land her mother left her. It's not much, but it's something. Enough to grow onions. Maybe raise a few ducks. She won't remarry quickly. She's not thinking that far ahead. Tonight she just wants the world to be still. And it is. The Nile flows in the distance like a steady breath. You hear it. You close your eyes, thinking about how strange it is that a woman, thousands of years before feminism, before suffrage, before no-fault divorce, could do this. And that her biggest worry tonight is how to keep the mice out of her onions. You smile in the dark. It's not history the way we were taught it. But it's real. And it's hers. You're in the scribe's house now. It's late afternoon, and the sun filters through the latticework in amber streaks. You watch as he dips his reed pen into black ink and scratches lines onto a new scroll. The air smells like dried papyrus, ink, and faintly, onion stew from a pot bubbling nearby. He hums as he writes. A low, gravelly tune without melody. Just rhythm. He's copying a marriage contract. Not one for royalty. Not for nobility. Just for two ordinary people, an artisan and a woman who sells perfume cones at the market. But you lean in because this is where things get interesting. He reads it aloud to himself, almost like a ritual. Should the wife wish to separate from her husband, she may take all that is hers and return to the house of her father. Let her not be restrained, nor her passage barred. You blink. There it is, clear as day. The wife can initiate divorce. She keeps her property. And no one, especially the husband, is allowed to stop her from leaving. And yes, your 21st century eyebrows just flew off your face. This is Egypt. 3,000 years ago. And she can walk out the door. You lean against the cool plaster wall and glance around the scribe's space. Scrolls are rolled neatly into bundles, each with faint reddish seals. One for taxes. One for temple dues. One, labeled betrothals and separations. There's something wild about seeing bureaucracy applied to heartbreak. You look over his shoulder. The next clause is about dowries. The woman brings her own property into the marriage: clothing, livestock, household items. If she leaves, she takes it all back. No questions. In some cases, the husband even agrees to a financial penalty if he causes the separation. You can't help it. You whisper. Prenups, but make it pharaonic. The scribe pauses. He tilts his head, as if he heard you. He doesn't understand your modern slang, but the amusement in his eyes says, yes, something like that. These documents weren't rare. But each one was unique. You're handed another scroll, older, more fragile. The ink is faded, the edges curled from centuries of sand and sweat. It reads like a love letter, with exit terms. The couple agrees to stay together, in happiness and trust. But if the wife becomes unhappy, if trust is broken, she may leave. It doesn't say why. There's no moral clause. No need for dramatic wrongdoing. It's enough that she wants out. Of course, that doesn't mean it was easy. Just because the contract allows her to leave doesn't mean society always made it comfortable. You stroll down the street now, past courtyards and fig trees, and overhear conversations in shaded corners. She left him for no reason. Someone whispers. Maybe he was cruel. Another offers. No, she just stopped loving him. You feel the tension. The law was clear. But hearts and opinions? Messy even then. You pause outside a weaving shop. Inside, a woman, older, gray streaks in her hair, sits beside her loom. She hums while threading dyed linen. She was divorced once years ago. She speaks without turning. It was in our contract. That I could leave. I wrote that myself. You ask, why did you leave? She doesn't answer right away. Then softly, because he stopped speaking to me like I mattered. No violence. No scandal. Just silence. And that was enough. You sit beside her on the cool tile floor. The rhythm of her shuttle through the loom is hypnotic. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like a metronome of healing. What's even more surprising? This wasn't elite behavior. You'd think this level of autonomy was reserved for royal wives or high-born ladies dripping in gold. But no, these were middle-class women. Merchants. Bakers. Beer brewers. Their contracts, preserved in scraps and shards, tells stories not of privilege, but of rights that extended through layers of society. And yet, scholars still disagree about how normal this was. Some argue that while the law allowed it, social pressures discouraged it. That a woman could divorce, but might pay a price in gossip, in reputation, in lost alliances. Others point to legal archives, hundreds of cases filed by women, that suggest the opposite. That this wasn't rare. It was a tool, used when necessary. And honestly, it's both. Because being allowed to do something doesn't mean it's easy. You're starting to see a pattern, autonomy wrapped in obligation, freedom filtered through tradition. A complex system where women had surprising leverage, but still had to push against subtle resistance. You return to the scribe's house one last time. He's finishing the contract. The couple is there now, nervous, shy, but smiling. This isn't a divorce. It's the beginning of their union. But the terms of separation are baked right in. She asks, "Can you add the clause about my mother's jewelry?" He nods. "And your goats?" She nods. "Them too." "The husband?" He agrees. He even suggests that if he ends the marriage, she should keep their shared clay oven. You raise your eyebrows again. This isn't just law, it's a mindset. A belief that a union between two people is between two people. Not a sacred institution enforced by divine punishment. But a partnership, one that can be dissolved when trust dissolves. And the fact that these choices were written down, signed, stamped, and stored? That's not just bureaucracy. That's revolutionary. You walk home as the sun sets, your sandals dragging tiny trails in the dust. Somewhere behind you, the scribe lights a lamp and leans over another scroll. Another contract. Another life, beginning or ending or shifting in some quiet way. You think of the woman from last night. You wonder if she ever looked back. Then you remember the words scratched into the margin of a papyrus. "I left because my peace mattered." You smile in the dark. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. But it echoes across centuries. The temple rises before you, sandstone and shadow. Massive columns stretch upward like petrified trees, their surfaces wrapped in prayers and tax records. Carvings of gods march in procession, stoic and wide-eyed, their eternal expressions indifferent to the petty squabbles of humans. But deep inside, past the colonnades and the scent of old myrrh, you hear something very human. Voices. Sharp ones. You slip through a side entrance, pressing against cool walls, past a basket of dried lotus petals and a sleepy temple cat that blinks once and goes back to not caring about you. In the center chamber, you find her again. Our woman. She's not here to worship. Not today. She's here to petition. Yes, she's bringing her divorce to the temple. Not to pray for a sign. Not to beg forgiveness. She's here for paperwork. You peek over her shoulder. She's speaking to two elders seated beside a statue of Thoth, god of writing and knowledge. He's holding a stylus. Fitting. Her voice is clear. Calm. But her hands clench the edges of her shawl. "He broke our agreement," she says. "He took my granary allotment. Refused to return my amulet. And he cursed me before the market women." The elder nods slowly, tapping a knuckle against the stone table. And just like that, the divorce becomes a case. You're witnessing ancient small claims court. But instead of a courtroom, it's a temple sanctuary. Instead of lawyers, it's priests trained in record keeping. Instead of a judge in robes, It's a council of community elders with bald heads and long memories. And honestly, it works. The woman lays out her claims. The husband isn't here yet, but he will be summoned. Until then, she's given a clay docket stamp and a date to return. Yes, a docket stamp. You chuckle. The ancient world had case numbers. Let that settle in. She's not the only one here either. You glance around and see two men arguing over a cow. A teenager begging to nullify a labor contract. And another woman, older, with a scarred cheek, filing to reclaim her mother's jewelry from a stepbrother. The temple is many things. Sanctuary, school, archive. But here? It's the courthouse. And in it, women speak with full voices. One case catches your ear, a record the elders are rereading aloud. A woman, years ago, filed for divorce because her husband refused to speak to her in public. Not beat her. Not abandon her. Just silenced her. And that was enough. The council ruled in her favor. She left with her possessions, her dignity intact, and a small stipend for 3 months, enough to get her back on her feet. You shake your head. It feels progressive. Almost suspiciously so. Could it really have been that simple? Historians disagree. Some say these cases are rare, cherry-picked examples that survived because they were exceptional. Others argue they're just the tip of a lost iceberg, everyday justice in a society that, oddly, never glorified its legal system the way others did. You glance at a dusty shelf behind the elders, stacks of scrolls tied with reed string. Dozens, maybe hundreds. You'll never read them all. But even seeing them? It whispers, this happened more than we think. And while the modern mind wants to categorize, was this feminist? Was it equal? The reality here is softer, murkier. It wasn't equality by our standards. But it was a kind of balance. You step outside for air and find her sitting on the temple steps. Our woman. Hands folded, eyes closed. Listening to the breeze through palm fronds. She doesn't look victorious. Or defeated. Just steady. The petition has been filed. The process is in motion. She'll return next week for a hearing. And in the meantime? Life goes on. A vendor passes with figs. Children run by laughing. A man calls out greetings and she waves back. Yes, her smile is thinner, but still there. There's no scandal clouding her. No shame clinging to her dress. Just a waiting. A pause between chapters. That night, you lie awake near the temple wall. You watch the stars. The same ones she sees. You wonder how many women filed claims here under their soft light. How many scrolls written by candle flicker told stories no one thought worth copying. Because the big histories, the ones carved in obelisks, don't record this. They remember wars. Pharaohs. Floods. Not the woman who stood her ground over a missing amulet and the insult of public silence. But she matters. You feel it in your chest. And maybe, just maybe, so did the scribes. Maybe that's why this case was written down in a careful, practiced hand, and stored behind the statue of a god with the head of an ibis and the pen of eternity. You wake before the birds. The temple is quieter than usual, its long stone corridors still clinging to the night's cool breath. Somewhere near the sanctuary, a novice drops a ceramic cup and mutters a curse you pretend not to hear. You walk slowly, trailing your fingers along the smooth, time-worn wall, the carvings barely discernible in the dim light. Today's not a trial. It's a blessing. Our woman, yes, her again, isn't here to argue or accuse. She's here to speak to the gods. Specifically to Mot. You follow her into a side chamber. No gold. No incense. Just a small statue of a woman with a single ostrich feather atop her head. That's Mot, the goddess of truth, justice, harmony, and cosmic order. No lightning bolts. No thunder. Just balance. And this morning, our woman kneels before her. Hands clasped. Eyes closed. Not begging. Not bargaining. Simply speaking. I ask only what is fair. Let what is broken be acknowledged. Let what is mine return to me. Let peace not be punished. You can't look away. It's not a ritual of revenge. It's a plea for restoration. A desire to have her story heard, not by the village, not even by the priests, but by the force that keeps the sun rising and the river flowing. Mot isn't just a deity. She's a principle. A system. A standard by which the world keeps from unraveling. And in a society where law and religion intertwine like reeds in a basket, invoking her name carries weight. You sit beside her, cross-legged, and take in the silence. There are no fireworks. No dramatic visions. Just a quiet certainty, like the sound of scales balancing behind your ribcage. In ancient Egypt, Mot wasn't something enforced from above. She was something each person upheld. Farmers. Pharaohs. Fishermen. Wives. The belief was, if you kept Mot in your words, in your contracts, in your marriages, then the Nile would rise, the crops would grow, and your soul would be light when weighed in the afterlife. And yes, even a divorce could be a way of restoring balance. You step outside with her as the sun breaks over the palm trees. The air smells like dust and promise. She doesn't smile. But her shoulders relax. Later today, she'll meet with the elders again. But this moment? It's hers. Just her and Mot, and the understanding that peace isn't the absence of trouble, it's the quiet alignment of things as they should be. You glance back at the temple's facade. There, on a faded mural, is the scene of judgment in the afterlife. A soul stands before Anubis. And beside him, Mot's feather rests on a golden scale. On the other side, the heart of the deceased. If the heart is heavier than the feather, there's no passage to paradise. You swallow. The ancient Egyptians believed that truth, fairness, and balance weren't just good ideas. They were cosmic requirements. And your soul could fail its final exam if you lived too selfishly. That's why this divorce matters. Not just legally. Spiritually. If our woman stayed in a marriage built on neglect or dishonesty, she'd be upholding falsehood. On Mot, if you will. But by speaking up, by walking away, she's returning her life to order. And that's not rebellion. It's devotion. Historians still fumble over this. Some argue that these interpretations are too generous, that we're projecting modern values onto ancient systems. Others point out that even in legal texts, the idea of Mot shows up often, in contracts, wills, even trade records. As if everyone wanted the universe to know. I am in balance. I have done what is right. Still others remain skeptical. They say it's just ritual fluff. A formality. That people still lied, cheated, hurt one another, and just hoped the gods weren't paying attention. You don't know who's right. But you do know this. Watching her in that chamber, under that feathered gaze, you didn't see performance. You saw a woman telling the truth, not because it guaranteed a reward, but because it felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Back in the village, she's greeted with nods. No gasps. No scandal. Just a few neighbors who heard she went to the temple and understand what that means. One woman offers to lend her a jar of oil. Another asks if she needs help moving her things. Someone slips a basket of dates onto her doorstep. It's not fanfare. It's solidarity. Even if they don't say it, even if some still whisper behind palm-shaded hands, they know she's done something difficult. And right. That evening, she returns to her small room. There's no husband there. No children yet. Just a mat, a bowl of lentils, and a breeze that moves the linen curtain like a breath. You sit beside her once more. She reaches into a small pouch and pulls out a tiny figurine, a carving of moth, feather and all. She sets it beside the oil lamp. And then she eats. Slowly. Quietly. Not in mourning. Not in celebration. But in peace. The feather has been weighed. The heart is lighter. And tomorrow? Well, there's still the matter of that missing granary allotment. But for now she sleeps. And so do you. It's hotter here. You're standing in the shade of a high stone wall, much thicker than anything in the village. The floor beneath your feet is polished alabaster, and someone just passed by wearing enough perfume to make your eyes water. Welcome to the palace. Well, not the palace. One of many. This is the domain of the elite. The whispering halls of royal marriages, where love is optional, alliances are everything, and affection, let's just say it gets outsourced to poetry more often than reality. You walk slowly along a corridor lined with columns painted with lotus blossoms and falcons mid-flight. Your sandals squeak faintly. You're trying not to stare, but it's hard. Servants glide past like trained birds, and every surface seems to glitter. Even the shadows are expensive. And yet, in this elegant maze you find her. Not our villager this time, but another woman. Younger. Adorned. Guarded. A royal consort. One of Pharaoh's many wives. And right now, she's contemplating leaving him. Yes. Leaving Pharaoh. You blink. Surely that's impossible. He's divine, after all. A living god. A man whose cartouche is carved into cliffs and kissed by the sun each morning. You don't just hand him a papyrus and say, "We're done." Or do you? You follow her through a painted doorway and into a private chamber. Cushions line the floor. A golden mirror reflects the dappled light from the pool outside. And beside her, folded neatly, is a legal document. Not a decree. Not a command. A contract. Her contract. You sit with her. Her hands tremble slightly as she touches the rolled scroll. The royal household isn't immune to divorce. In fact, history records more than a few separations among Pharaoh's wives, particularly among secondary consorts and high-born women given in political alliance. They weren't slaves. They were strategic players. And sometimes, they chose to leave. Of course, it wasn't as easy as walking out with a bundle and a glare. There were politics. There were hierarchies. There were gods involved, technically. But there were also contracts. And some of them, though carefully worded, gave these women room to act. You flash to a historical puzzle, the letter from Amarna. One of the most debated documents in Egyptology is a letter sent by an Egyptian queen, possibly Inkhesenamen, widow of King Tut, to the Hittite king. She wrote, "My husband is dead. I have no son. They say you have many sons. If you send me one, he shall be my husband, and he will become king of Egypt. This wasn't a romantic request. It was strategic, daring, and deeply political. Some scholars see it as a form of self-determined remarriage. Others think it was a last-ditch effort to escape palace control. And many argue it was something even more shocking, an elite woman trying to rewrite the rules after her marriage, possibly an abusive one, had ended in turmoil. Did she initiate the separation? Did she refuse to remarry within the Egyptian court? No one knows for sure. But the letter exists, and its implications still spark debate today. Back in the chamber, your consort stands. She's rehearsing what she'll say to the steward. Not Pharaoh himself, of course not. But the head of household affairs. The one who manages the day-to-day alliances, the flow of gifts, the distribution of jewelry and property. She's entitled to certain things. Her dowry. Her robes. Possibly even her suite in the back wing, though she may have to bargain for that. And her reason? She doesn't need one. But if pressed, she'll say what royal women have said for centuries. He no longer honors me. Simple. Elegant. Devastating. You wonder if Pharaoh will care. You suspect, probably not. He has dozens of wives. Hundreds of concubines. But something tells you, she's not doing this to hurt him. She's doing it to reclaim herself. You walk with her down a long, hushed corridor. The guards don't question her. The scribe assigned to the royal harem already knows her name. He takes the scroll. He nods. It's not the first time. And it won't be the last. Historians still argue over how much agency royal women really had. Some claim these separations were illusions, engineered by court politics. Others insist there's enough evidence, in marriage contracts and correspondence, to believe that even here, in the eye of Pharaoh's storm, women could act with some degree of independence. A few skeptics roll their eyes and say, "Sure. But only if they weren't too powerful. Or too inconvenient." Still, the paper trails remain. And in a society where kings claimed godhood, those trails are, frankly, scandalous. Because they reveal something tender and dangerous. That even in golden cages, some birds negotiated the door open. Later you find her again. Not in the palace. Not in the temple. But in a garden. She's sitting under a sycamore tree, sipping date wine. Alone. Free. Not cast out. Not shunned. Just changed. She watches two ducks paddle across a small pond. You sit beside her, listening to the buzz of summer bees and the distant hum of flutes. For a moment, it's easy to forget she just left a god king. But she doesn't forget. She raises her cup slightly. "Tomat," she says. And smiles. You don't speak. You just breathe. And as the sun slips lower across the garden walls, you realize, sometimes, even the most powerful men lose something. And sometimes, the quiet woman who walks away gains everything. You're back in the village now. The palace feels like a dream you half remember. Gilded halls, ceremonial silence, women in gold-threaded linen and too much eye paint. But this place? This is real. Dusty. Loud. Alive. You're standing near a courtyard where 3 clay ovens bake bread in a daily rhythm older than dynasties. Children chase a goat through a pile of discarded grain husks, and someone nearby is yelling about cumin, again. You duck under a reed awning and find a small cluster of neighbors seated on woven mats. They're here for a hearing. Not in a courtroom. Just out in the open, like most village matters. The accused? A man named Mena. The charge? He yelled at his wife in public, for burning the honey cakes. Yes. This is a divorce trial about baked goods. You blink. Surely this is not serious? But it is. Not because of the honey cakes, but because of what came next. The wife, Rihut, is sitting upright, arms crossed over her chest. She's had enough. Not just of the yelling, but of the way Mena has spoken to her for years. In front of her friends. Her sisters. The man once praised for his calm now shouts whenever fish is overcooked. He broke his word, she says flatly. He swore before my father he'd speak with kindness. And now? He curses me over pastries. Mena scoffs. But Rihut? She has receipts. Or rather, witnesses. 3 of them. Welcome to the petty court of ancient Egypt. You're not in front of a judge in a powdered wig. You're among elders, friends, and neighbors. And everyone here takes their job seriously. Rihut presents a record, scribbled in faded ink on a potsherd, from her marriage contract. There it is, 3rd line from the top. He shall not shout at her in the market, nor in the home, nor in the presence of others. You cough. That's specific. And binding. Mena tries to argue, but the panel interrupts him. An older woman on the council, a retired beer brewer with no patience for fools, narrows her eyes. You shouted at her. Over cakes. In front of my niece. You can almost feel the verdict slide into place like a stone grinding into a door frame. And just like that, Rihut is free to leave. She gets to keep her cooking tools, her personal amulets, and a portion of their shared barley stores. Mena will return the goat he took when he left last week. The elders agree on the terms, and the crowd disperses, some satisfied, some muttering that cakes shouldn't break a house. But you? You're stunned. Because this wasn't about dessert. It was about dignity. And the way Rihut carried herself, calm, firm, factual, it's as if she'd been preparing for this moment for years. You walk beside her as she gathers her things. She's humming. Not with joy, exactly, but with release. You ask her if she'll miss him. She shrugs. He was kind once. Then the honey turned bitter. There's a poetic streak in her. You like her instantly. She offers you a date from her basket. You accept, even though it's slightly too dry. You know, she says between bites. I once heard about a woman who left her husband for adding too much salt. You both laugh. Was she punished? Oh no. She got the house, the donkey, and the salt. More laughter. Real this time. These aren't isolated cases. All across Egypt, from papyri and village archives to fragments dug from middens, we find echoes of women like Rihut. Their complaints? Sometimes simple. Sometimes tragic. But always recorded. One scroll describes a woman who filed for separation because her husband refused to let her visit her sister. Another tells of a wife who divorced after her husband failed to provide her monthly oil ration. These weren't dramatic betrayals. No sword fights. No midnight escapes. Just quiet violations of agreement. Of Mott. And that, to them, was enough. Still, not everyone agrees that these records show real divorce power. Some scholars argue that the documents were symbolic. That in practice, men still held the reins. That these rare papyri survived because they were exceptions. Others counter that the consistency of these stories suggests otherwise. They see in them a legal framework and a cultural one, where relationships were seen as partnerships, where fairness mattered more than permanence. And maybe they're both right. Because history isn't tidy. It's messy. Like spilled flour and burnt honey cakes. As the sun dips low, you find yourself in Rehut's new home. A tiny mud brick structure near the granaries. Humble, but hers. She's setting down her cooking stones, unrolling a mat, arranging herbs in little clay jars. She moves like someone who knows how to build a life. You ask her if she'll remarry. She doesn't look up. Maybe. If he knows how to make honey cakes himself. You both smile. It's not bitterness. It's boundaries. And in this ancient world where divorce didn't always mean disaster, it's a beginning. Not a punishment. Just a shift. Like the Nile changing course slightly. Quiet. Powerful. Inevitable. You lie back on the mat and close your eyes. The scent of honey still lingers in the air. You hear them before you see them. Laughter. Arguing. Someone sneezes twice. Then comes the thump of a sandal slipping on packed clay, followed by a loud, "He did what?" and a chorus of, "Mmm." You round the corner into what looks like chaos, but it isn't. It's court. Not court like you know it. No robes. No wigs. No solemn silence punctuated by gavels. This is an open-air courtyard at the edge of a grain depot. Someone's brought a basket of figs. Someone else is balancing a baby on their hip while giving a testimony. And in the middle of it all? A circle of people sitting on mats. This is the People's Council. You're watching a legal system with no judges. No towering bench. No powdered clerk announcing, "All rise." Just villagers, elders, scribes, neighbors, hearing cases, weighing evidence, and voting. And today, they're deciding whether a man has to return his ex-wife's brewing tools, or if she forfeited them by taking too long to move out. You slide into a shaded spot beside a goat and listen. The man says, "She left them here for 3 months. That's abandonment." The woman says, "I was sick. And when I came back, he'd hidden them in the granary and said they were his now." An elder grunts. "Who saw the tools first?" A teenager raises his hand. "I did. She lent them to my mother when we were out of beer." Another voice. "He used the ladle for pickles. It smells like vinegar now." You try not to laugh. But this isn't a joke. Not to them. These tools are a woman's livelihood. Her ability to earn. Her autonomy. And in this system? That matters. The elders deliberate. Out loud. In front of everyone. They recall past cases. A cousin's dispute over a cow. A neighbor who tried to claim his wife's loom after she died. And then, without ceremony, they vote. The woman wins. She gets her tools back. The ladle too. Even if it does smell like pickles. You smile. Not because she won, but because of how she won. This wasn't a priest's decree. Not a royal order. It was community logic. A collective sense of fairness applied like balm to the scrape of everyday life. Ancient Egypt's legal system wasn't built on rigid bureaucracy. It was built on mot. Balance. Truth. Harmony. Not in theory, in practice. And you're seeing it unfold right now. You lean in as a second case begins. This one? A man accuses his wife of leaving him without cause. She stands, arms folded, and replies, "He sold the chicken I raised to buy date wine." Then he drank it alone. The wine. Not the chicken. You hear snickers. Even one of the elders coughs into his palm. She continues, "We agreed I'd keep the poultry. It was part of the marriage deal." The man mutters something unrepeatable. And just like that, he loses his case. She's allowed to leave. She even gets 3 hens from the village coop as restitution. And no, you're not making that up. There's no formal judge. No police officer standing guard. But there is order. Because people are watching. Everyone sees. Everyone remembers. The justice system here isn't sealed behind walls. It lives in the open, shaped by shared expectations and the shame of public misbehavior. And somehow, it works. No jails. No executions. Just agreements. Restitutions. Social correction. You think about that. And you wonder how much justice requires fear. And how much could run on something softer. Historians don't always agree on what to call this system. Some call it arbitration. Others say quasi-democratic. A few dismiss it entirely as informal, extra-legal chaos. But the documents, what few survive, paint a different picture. Records of elders deciding disputes. Villagers writing down verdicts. Clay tablets listing who owes whom what and why. Some of the most detailed legal records in Egyptian history aren't from temples or capitals. They're from villages like this one. Places where women like Rihut and her friends got to stand in the middle of a circle and say calmly, "He broke the agreement," and have people listen. You walk with one of the council members after the session. He's chewing on a stalk of sweetgrass and humming to himself. You ask if he's ever seen a case he couldn't decide. "Oh, all the time," he says. "That's why there's 7 of us." 7? He nods. "Always an odd number. That way there's no tie." You raise an eyebrow. "What happens if someone doesn't show up?" "We wait." "Or yell until they do?" You both laugh. But beneath the joke is something real. The system needs everyone. It only works because people show up. Speak. Listen. Remember. That evening you return to the woman with the brewing tools. She's cleaning them with a brush made of date palm fibers, muttering about vinegar. She looks up when she sees you and grins. "Justice smells weird today," she says. You sit beside her. She hands you a small jar of fresh beer. It's good. A little fizzy. Warm. "I thought it'd be worse," she says. "Standing up in front of everyone like that." You ask, "Why did you do it?" She shrugs. "Because I could." And that might be the simplest reason of all. Justice without judges. Power without titles. And women who knew exactly how to make both work in their favor. You're crouched in the corner of a storage room, trying not to sneeze. Dust clings to everything. Woven baskets, linen wraps, piles of barley, even the 2 cats who have absolutely claimed this place as their personal kingdom. But your attention isn't on them. It's on the woman standing in the center of the room. She's pointing to each item one by one. "That's my necklace from my mother. That amphora of beer, mine. 2 bolts of linen, the mirror, the stool. And the cow. Especially the cow." A scribe records everything with the steady rhythm of someone who's done this 100 times. This isn't a robbery. This is an inventory. Because this woman? She's leaving her marriage. And she's taking what's hers. Welcome to ancient Egypt's version of post-divorce asset division. You're watching something that feels remarkably modern, except no lawyers, no subpoenas, and no need to write a 10-page motion to claim the good stool. Instead, it's simple. What she brought into the marriage, she takes with her. What they acquired together, they divide based on pre-agreed terms. And the cow? Well, that's negotiable. You follow her into a small adjacent chamber where the elders await. Yes, it's another council. But this time, they've come to witness the separation, not judge it. The woman presents her list. The scribe reads aloud. The departing wife shall retain her dowry in full, any goods obtained through her own labor, any gifts explicitly given to her during the union. The husband, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, only grunts once. He doesn't object to the linen or the beer. But the cow? He insists they bought it together. The elders murmur. One pipes up. Did she tend to it? The woman raises an eyebrow. I birthed its last calf with my own hands. Another elder. Then the cow stays with her. And that's that. No fuss. No gavel. Just common sense and respect for contribution. Property rights for women in ancient Egypt weren't symbolic. They were real. Enforceable. Embedded in law and culture. Women could inherit, bequeath, buy, sell, and sue over property. And in a divorce, their possessions were not absorbed or controlled by their husband. They remained separate. That little stool? Hers. The jewelry? Hers. The cow? Well, now very clearly hers. And that ownership wasn't erased just because the marriage ended. In fact, some contracts specified exactly what the woman could reclaim, in poetic detail. She shall walk away with her sandals, her tunic, her mirror, her bronze coal jar, and the perfume gifted to her on the feast of Opet. You smirk. If someone tried to keep your mascara during a breakup, you'd probably start a legal insurrection too. Historians often raise their brows at this. How could a society so old, so deeply spiritual, allow women this much property freedom, when centuries later, many women in Greece, Rome, or even medieval Europe couldn't legally own a spoon without their husband's permission? It's one of those Egyptian contradictions. They had pyramids but no wheels. A divine monarchy but surprising legal flexibility for women. Some scholars suggest it was a holdover from matrilineal traditions. Others think the geography played a part. Property passed through families in tight-knit agricultural zones, and women were key to that continuity. And others? They just admit, we don't fully know. But the records don't lie. And in those fragile papyrus scrolls, women's names are written beside land deeds, debt receipts, lease agreements, and yes, divorce settlements. You walk with her after the meeting. She's leading the cow with one hand, balancing a small chest on her shoulder with the other. She looks tired, but satisfied. You ask her if she'll be okay. She smiles without looking at you. I have my tools. My grain. My cow. I'll be fine. It's not pride. It's certainty. She has what she needs to rebuild. And maybe that's the difference here. Divorce in ancient Egypt wasn't social death. It wasn't exile. It wasn't shame. It was transition. A rearrangement of the world that left room for the woman to keep standing. That night, you sit with her as she arranges her new home. She hangs her necklace on a peg, unpacks the beer amphora, lights a small lamp with oil she made herself. Then she settles onto a mat beside the cow, who's made herself comfortable in the corner like a large, snorting roommate. The woman exhales. She's not angry. Not joyful. Just grounded. As if the earth beneath her has finally stopped tilting. You lie back too, eyes half closed, listening to the sounds of her world falling gently into place. A copper bracelet clinks. The cow shuffles. The oil lamp flickers. And somewhere inside that soft rhythm, you hear the quiet sound of a life rearranged, but not diminished. You hear laughter before you round the corner. It's not wild or loud, it's the low, hesitant kind. The kind that tiptoes out of someone's throat like it's testing the air. And when you peek through the reeds, you see them. Yes. Them. Her. And him. Sitting together. At the same mat. Sharing pomegranate seeds. Your brain short-circuits a little. Wait. Didn't we just walk her through a divorce? Didn't you leave with the cow, the stool, the brewing tools? Wasn't there a ladle that smelled like pickles? And now here they are, side by side, like nothing ever happened? No. Not like nothing happened. Like everything happened. And they decided to start again anyway. You're witnessing something rarer than divorce in ancient Egypt. You're witnessing remarriage. Voluntary. Mutual. Unrushed. And yes, between two people who had already called it quits. You duck beneath a hanging tapestry and make your way inside, pretending to study a cracked water jug while eavesdropping like it's your full-time job. They're talking about onions. And roof repairs. And, adorably, what to name the calf born last week. He wants pomegranate. She says absolutely not. You're waiting for tension. But it doesn't come. What you feel instead is gentleness. Like the second version of a story, told slower, softer, with the sharp corners sanded down. Ancient Egyptian law allowed divorced couples to remarry. No ceremony required. No shame attached. If both agreed, they could reunite, and even redraft a new contract. And yes, they often did. You follow them to the scribe's table later that afternoon. He greets them with a grin like he's seen this before, probably too many times. Same terms as before? He asks, not even lifting his pen. She smiles. Mostly. But this time I want my name listed first. He raises an eyebrow, then nods. She gets her mirror, her brewing tools, and, of course, the cow. Still hers. He keeps the granary access, and agrees not to touch her pickling jar again under any circumstances. The contract is signed. And just like that, they're married. Again. You want to ask why. Why come back? Why risk the same old wounds? But you don't. Because the answer is in how they move now. How he pours water into her clay cup without looking. How she adjusts the hem of his robe so he doesn't trip. Not out of romance. Out of rhythm. Reconciliation wasn't rare in ancient Egypt, but it was entirely optional. Some couples divorced and never spoke again. Others remarried quickly, perhaps because of property ties, or children, or loneliness. But some? They circled back slowly. After seasons of space. After enough time passed for silence to soften. And the law let them do it. No questions. No judgments. Just a new scroll and another signature. You walk through the market later that day and overhear whispers. Did you hear? They're back together. Really? After all that noise about the stew? People change. Or maybe they just remembered they liked the same soup. You grin. There's a sweet ordinariness to it. Divorce doesn't end reputations here. It shifts them, softens edges, gives people room to become again. And in this system, marriage isn't forever by obligation, only by choice. Each day, each week, each season, it's a decision. You stay because you want to. You leave if you must. You return if both hearts still hum the same tune. And if not, that's okay too. Later, as dusk folds into the alleys, you find them in the courtyard. She's grinding herbs for supper. He's patching a tear in a reed basket. A little girl, hers from a previous union, sits nearby painting pictures of cows with blue dye. The three of them form a small triangle of warmth. You sit close, your back against the wall. They speak little, but the quiet says enough. At one point, she hands him a bowl. He accepts it with a small bow. Not performative. Not romantic. Just kind. Just new. Historians have found records of remarriage and divorce contracts. Some even had conditional clauses. Should both parties wish to reunite, they may do so with original terms or new ones agreed. Others noted changes in inheritance lines, or the transfer of dowry back to the wife if no reconciliation occurred. And in all of them? Autonomy. This wasn't forced reconciliation. It was choice. Again. Still. Always. You lie back on the cool mat that night, eyes tracing the pattern of stars. You think about how rare it is to see stories loop without bitterness. How remarkable it is to be allowed to try again without shame. And how sometimes the most radical act in any century is quietly sitting beside someone and saying, "I'm willing to start over." You close your eyes. And somewhere near your ear, the calf snorts softly. You find the scroll buried under a stack of dried onions. Yes. Onions. Because this isn't a temple archive or royal storeroom. It's a house. A small one. The kind that smells like yeast and crushed coriander. And the scroll you're looking at? It's not an official record. Not a contract. Not a ruling. It's personal. The ink has faded. The edges are cracked. The handwriting is uneven, hesitant in some places, angry in others. But what it says? You read it once. Then again. And then you sit down slowly, as the words settle over you like warm sand. He stopped speaking to me after I cut my hair. Said I looked like my brother. I laughed. He didn't. I made stew. He wouldn't eat it. I asked him what was wrong. He said nothing. Every day. For 7 days. You're not reading a legal document. You're reading a diary. A woman's private record. Her side of the story. Not to persuade anyone. Just to remember. Just to say it somewhere. These fragments? They're rare. Precious. Most of what survives from ancient Egypt are formal things: tax records, temple offerings, trade receipts. But every now and then, someone finds something else. A letter. A note. A whispered thought etched onto broken pottery or tucked into a chest. And those are different. They breathe. You keep reading. The scribe asked why I wanted to leave. I told him. Because I feel like furniture. He walks around me. Never through me. That line? You read it again. He walks around me. You don't need a time machine. You don't need a translation. You know that feeling. You've seen it in friends. In neighbors. In mirror reflections. And suddenly, this woman who lived 3,000 years ago? She's not history. She's familiar. You set the scroll aside and explore the rest of the chest. Letters. Lists. Notes. One is addressed to a sister. I am coming home. I'll bring the spindle. Tell mother not to cry. Another is scribbled in shorthand symbols. Keep the necklace. He said he never liked it. I wore it for me anyway. You exhale. It's like stumbling into someone's emotional attic. Forgotten moments. Unsent messages. A museum of little griefs. But also a quiet resistance. A refusal to let her voice be erased. Some scholars believe these documents were practice texts. Exercises in literacy. Scribes in training mimicking real emotion to improve their handwriting. Others argue they were drafts, messages never delivered, like emotional rehearsal. But a few, those who've read enough, who've translated hundreds of these fragments, believe they're real. Unfiltered. Authentic. The unsanctioned side of the divorce story. Not the cow. Not the brewing tools. But her. The part that couldn't be notarized. The ache. The relief. The way silence can shape a house just as much as walls. You leave the house as the sun begins to sink. Not into darkness, but into a long, golden sigh. The kind that makes every clay wall and fig tree look like it was painted by memory. You walk with her now. Not our previous woman. Not Rehat. Just her, this quiet voice in your mind from the scrolls. You imagine her stopping by the river, touching the surface like it might talk back. You picture her saying nothing at all. Because maybe that day, she didn't want to be strong or poetic. Maybe she just wanted a pomegranate and 10 uninterrupted minutes. You find another scrap tucked inside a sealed jar. It reads, He was not cruel. That is what hurts. He was not cruel. He was simply gone. And somehow that's worse. You sit with that thought. And realize how many breakups don't come with shouting or doors slammed. Sometimes they arrive like fog. Thick. Silent. Heavy. And women in ancient Egypt? They knew that too. They knew the paperwork. The public hearing. The list of assets. But they also knew the part no scroll records. The quiet undoing. The grief that isn't dramatic, but daily. And the need to write it down so it doesn't disappear. You return to your resting mat that night with a handful of copied lines. You reread them under flickering lamp light. And you think, maybe the act of writing was the only justice some of them ever got. The scroll didn't change the ruling. It didn't give back the necklace. But it gave her a name. Even if we've lost it. It gave her story texture. Echo. Weight. It made her real. To herself. To you. To the future. And maybe that's enough. It's late. The village has quieted into that hour where only dogs, embers, and secrets stay awake. You're walking a narrow footpath now, between sleeping houses and swaying reeds, following a flicker of lamplight that shouldn't be there. It's coming from behind a low wall, half swallowed by vines. You duck inside, and immediately the smell hits you. Not foul, but strange. Resin. Burned herbs. Oil. Something sour, something sweet. A woman sits cross-legged in the center of the courtyard. Her eyes are ringed with dark coal. Her hands stained yellow with turmeric. She doesn't look up when you arrive. But she says softly, "Is it love you want, or freedom?" You don't answer. You're not here for a spell. But someone else was. And that someone, she's here too. Our woman. Divorced. But not done. Because tonight she wants more than legal fairness. She wants release. Welcome to the world of ancient Egyptian folk magic, where papyri were filled not only with contracts and inventories, but incantations, potions, and protective charms. And sometimes, when heartbreak lingered too long, women turned to other tools. You sit beside the clay hearth, watching as the coal-eyed woman grinds something into a paste. It's dark, earthy, smells faintly of salt and fig. Your woman, let's call her Tia, is clutching a lock of hair. She hands it over without speaking. Not her ex-husband's. Her own. The ritual isn't about punishing him. It's about cutting the thread that still connects them. You've heard the rumors. Amulets placed beneath pillows. Oils poured at thresholds. Spells whispered into river water. To draw love. To bind it. To end it. And yes, sometimes, to banish it entirely. Not all divorces end with satisfaction. Sometimes the legal ending isn't enough. The heart still flutters at the wrong moment. Still aches when it shouldn't. So women came here. Not to hurt. Not to curse. But to forget. To sever. And maybe, to heal. The magic itself is practical. A blend of herbs. A line of spoken verse. A symbolic action, a breaking, a burning, a burial. Tonight, it's fire. Tia breathes her ex-husband's name into a bundle of dried reeds. Then she burns it. Simple as that. As the smoke rises, she doesn't cry. Doesn't smile. She just watches. And when it's done, she whispers, "No more." The wind carries the smoke east, toward the Nile. You both watch until it's gone. And in that long silence, you realize something. The spell wasn't for him. It was for her. Magical divorce rituals weren't uncommon. Papyri from Hellenistic Egypt, centuries after the time of the pharaohs, contain detailed instructions for loosening the bonds of marriage through ritual. Earlier periods mention separation oils and dream spells used to soothe the mind after heartbreak. Some scholars dismiss them as superstition. Others view them as early psychology, a cultural attempt to metabolize grief through action. And many believe they coexisted seamlessly with formal law. You could go to the scribe by day, and to the wise woman by night, and nobody saw a contradiction. Because one healed the contract. The other? The cord. You walk back through the dark, your path now lined with small charms. Bundles of garlic above doorways. Little clay eyes tucked into alcoves. Love was precious here. But so was protection. And where love failed, there was something else. Something old. You pass two women whispering at a well. One drops something inside, a shred of linen perhaps. The other stares until the ripple vanishes. It's not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just human. Ancient. Eternal. You find Tia again in the morning. She's cooking lentils. Feeding chickens. Humming. You ask if she feels different. She doesn't answer right away. Then, "I dreamed he came to say goodbye." You nod. "Did you answer?" She shrugs. "No. But the door was open." You don't press. Some spells aren't loud. They don't glow or thunder. They just settle. Like dust after a long walk. Like silence after a final word. Like peace. Historians still puzzle over how integrated magic was in daily Egyptian life. Was it religion? Science? Theater? Or simply emotional infrastructure? Because where the law stopped, magic began. And sometimes, especially in matters of love and loss, both were needed. One to draw the line, the other to erase the shadow. That night, you lie near a small oil lamp. The flame dances like it knows a secret. You think of all the women who lit lamps like this after separation, who whispered names into the dark, who crushed herbs not for flavor, but for freedom. And you wonder, how many modern hearts still wish they could burn the bundle and breathe again? You drift off slowly. The air smells like anise. And the last thing you hear? The faint echo of a voice saying, "No more." You wake to the sound of someone arguing with a donkey. Not metaphorically. Literally. You peek through the woven curtain and see a man tugging at the reins of a deeply unimpressed donkey, trying to load it with bundles of grain. The donkey has absolutely no interest in this task and communicates its opinion with a flat, prolonged HNNNGH. You smile. But the smile doesn't last. Because just beyond them, seated alone on a short mud brick wall, is a woman you don't recognize. She's older. Worn. Her shawl is pulled tight even though the morning is already warm. Her eyes aren't focused on the street, but somewhere far behind it. You step closer. She doesn't see you. Doesn't move. But her hands? They're holding something. A folded piece of cloth. Worn. Embroidered. It's the corner of a wedding veil. And you know. She didn't leave. She couldn't. Not every woman in ancient Egypt walked away. You've seen the scrolls. The records. The confident rehuts, the practical TIAs, the women who knew how to use the system and slipped through its narrow openings. But not all stories end that way. Some women were trapped. By debt. By children. By social pressure. By silence. You sit beside her gently. She doesn't flinch. Just speaks. He's not cruel. He just forgets I'm here. I asked once. Long ago. He said if I left, no one would take me in. So I stayed. For the children. Then for the goats. Then because the sun came up and I was still here. Your throat tightens. This is the side you haven't seen yet. The side the contracts don't capture. The side that haunts the margins. Egyptian law may have permitted divorce, but culture is heavier than law. In cities? Perhaps it was easier. More anonymity. More scribes. But in villages like this, everyone knows everyone. Your family lives 2 huts away. Your husband's brother is your neighbor. Your childhood friend is married to the local scribe. Leaving isn't always just leaving. It's dismantling your entire place in the fabric. And some threads can't be pulled without unraveling the whole blanket. Historians wrestle with this paradox. They see the rights on paper, women owning land, filing petitions, keeping property. But they also see the absences. The women who don't appear in records. The ones who endured quietly, who didn't have family to support them, or dared not speak up. And the truth is, freedom on papyrus doesn't always translate into freedom in practice. Especially when shame, survival, and social networks are all tangled up. You listen as she tells you about her wedding. About the goat stew they served. How she laughed when he dropped the ring in the fire pit. About the first baby. And the second. And then. Nothing. You don't need her to say more. The veil in her lap says enough. Not a symbol of love. A symbol of stuckness. of identity woven so tightly into another person that pulling away would tear the whole thing apart. Later, you pass by the local council. They're resolving a case about barley theft. But your ears catch a quiet exchange between two elders. She's still with him, isn't she? Yes. Her father won't take her back. And her brother's gone to Memphis. You pause. That's the woman's story, reduced to logistics. No villain. No broken contract. Just a lack of exits. And isn't that how it often is? Not with flames, but with walls. You return to her house in the afternoon. She's sweeping the floor. She offers you a date. You accept. And you sit there, the two of you, in a silence full of things not said. You ask gently if she ever thought about leaving again. She shakes her head. Then pauses. Then nods. Once. But that's all. Not every tale here ends in empowerment. Some end in survival. In compromise. In the quiet grief of choosing the familiar cage over the unknown field. And we have to hold those stories too. Because they're real. And because ignoring them would be like turning away from the veil in her lap. Pretending it isn't heavy. Pretending it doesn't matter. That night you lie awake thinking about her. About all the women who stayed. Not because they couldn't read. Not because they weren't brave. But because bravery sometimes means staying upright when you want to fall down. And because leaving isn't always safer. And sometimes, just sometimes, love isn't the reason we stay. It's the excuse. The balm we rub over the scar and pretend is still skin. You close your eyes. And you whisper a small apology. To her. And to all the women who were never in the scrolls, because they couldn't leave the room. You smell olives before you hear the accent. You're sitting on the edge of a busy street now, busier than the dusty village lanes you've grown used to. This place hums. Chariots clatter over paving stones. Vendors shout prices in Egyptian and Greek. A soldier walks by in sandals that glint like someone buffed them with ambition. This isn't your quiet Nileside settlement anymore. Welcome to Alexandria. Welcome to the Empire. Egypt has changed hands. Again. First the Persians. Then Alexander the Great. Now the Ptolemies, the Greek-speaking, wine-drinking, philosophy-quoting dynasty that inherited Egypt like a family heirloom they don't quite understand. And soon? Rome will come knocking, too. You watch a woman in a crisp white chiton walk into a scribe's office. She's trailed by 2 servants and a goat. Of course. The goat, you've come to accept, is non-negotiable. But the scroll she carries? That's what catches your eye. It's a marriage contract. But not just any marriage contract. It's bilingual. Greek and Egyptian. 2 worlds. 1 agreement. And buried in the Egyptian section are familiar words. Should the woman wish to leave the marriage, she may do so, retaining her dowry, her goods, and what is hers by labor or gift. You blink. After centuries of conquest, occupation, and cultural reshuffling, the clause survived. Egyptian women still had divorce rights under foreign rule. That's the wild part. Even as Greek and Roman legal systems, often far less generous toward women, took root in the cities, the old ways didn't vanish. They adapted. You follow the woman as she speaks to the clerk in a fluent blend of both tongues. Her scribe is Greek. Her heart? Still Egyptian. The contract is sealed. If she ever wants to leave, she can. And the goat? Still hers. Of course. You move through the city and see how systems blend. Greek women, accustomed to needing a male guardian for even basic transactions, begin learning from their Egyptian counterparts. Slowly, cautiously. A few of them even marry Egyptian men and adopt Egyptian marital contracts. Why? Because the Egyptian version is better, more fair, more flexible, more human. And the men? Well, some grumble. But others see the benefit. The structure. The harmony. The mat. Even under empire, the river still flows. Even under conquest, some things hold. But not everything survives. Roman law begins creeping in. Slow at first, like a draft under a door. By the time of Cleopatra, some documents shift in tone. Property rights are redefined. Inheritance laws tilt. Papyri once filled with the soft cadence of partnership now carry sharper edges. Some historians call it a regression. Others call it inevitable. But you know the truth lies somewhere in between. Because even when the law grew colder, culture kept its ember. You sit beside an old woman in a textile shop. She's Greek by name, Egyptian by soul. She tells you of her grandmother, who left her husband after he sold their land without asking. She walked right into the scribe's office with a palm branch and a glare. The woman laughs. He didn't even finish his tea. You ask if that's still possible today? She pauses. Legally? Harder. But culturally? She smiles. Sometimes a woman doesn't need law. She just needs a witness. And then she looks right at you. You nod. Message received. The scrolls from this period are fascinating. They wobble between languages, between legal systems, between power structures. But the core? The rights of women, especially in marital contracts, remain surprisingly durable. A Greek woman named Apollonia files for divorce in a hybrid court. A Roman-Egyptian hybrid contract specifies, if she desires to no longer dwell with him, she may go, unmolested. These aren't the majority. But they exist. And in a time when Roman law would often make divorce a privilege of men, that means something. You walk the harbor at sunset. Ships groan in their moorings. Lanterns flicker. Somewhere, a philosopher is giving a lecture no one asked for. And beside you? A woman sits, feet dangling over the water. She's holding a scroll. A contract. You asked if she's going to end her marriage. She doesn't answer. She just tears the scroll in half. Not out of anger, but release. The pieces drift into the sea. And the sound they make as they hit the water? Soft. Freeing. Final. Historians still argue over whether Egypt's legal rights for women influenced Roman or Greek law. Some say no, those systems were too rigid, too patriarchal. Others point to subtle shifts. New allowances. New ideas about women and property. And maybe, just maybe, it all started with a handful of stubborn women by the Nile who said, "No. I'm done." And meant it. And wrote it down. And walked away with their mirror, their goat, and their name intact. The stars are out again. But this time, they feel closer. You're in a courtyard bathed in soft lamplight. A fig tree leans lazily overhead, its leaves flickering like slow applause in the breeze. Clay jars line the walls, their round bellies still warm from the day's sun. A cat sleeps on the step. And in the middle of it all she sits. Our last woman. Her name is Neferet. She's older than most of the women you've followed. Not old, but seasoned. like a jar that's been sealed and unsealed many times and still doesn't crack. She's threading beads onto a cord, each one a different color, a different shape. Her fingers are steady. But her thoughts? You can feel them churning. Because tomorrow morning, just after sunrise, she's going to the temple. And she's not coming back married. This is her last night as a wife. She's not crying. She's not pacing. She's just present. Every movement careful. Every breath deep. You sit beside her. She doesn't flinch. Doesn't ask why you're here. Because maybe, tonight, she just needs someone who listens and doesn't speak. Someone who won't tell her she's brave. Or foolish. Or late. Someone who won't say, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Or, "Are you sure?" Because she's asked herself those questions 1,000 times already. And she's tired of answering them. She used to laugh more. She tells you that, not with sorrow, but with recognition. "I had this laugh," she says. "It would make the chickens run away. Too loud. Too bright. And now?" She shrugs. "He didn't kill it. I just stopped feeding it." You nod. She doesn't need pity. She needs a door. And tomorrow, she'll walk through it. The night stretches long. She packs slowly. Carefully. But not much. A necklace. A cloth pouch. A chipped figurine of Hathor she kept hidden behind the cooking jars. "I bought it with my own coin," she says. "Didn't want him to think it was his goddess too." You both chuckle. It's quiet. But real. There's no drama here. No midnight escape. Just quiet preparation. Like getting ready for a journey after a long rest. She lights incense. Not for him. For herself. Frankincense and sandalwood. "I want to smell like myself again," she murmurs. And you realize, this isn't just about ending a marriage. It's about reclaiming her body. Her space. Her scent. Her shape. It's about remembering that she was never just a wife. And tomorrow? She'll be something else. Someone else. Herself. She whispers names into the smoke. Not curses. Blessings. For her children. For the house. Even for him. Yes, even him. "I don't want to carry him with me," she says. Anger takes up too much room. You feel it in your bones. The weight of that wisdom. The years it must have taken to carve that truth into something she could hold. And now? She's ready to set it down. The moon rises higher. She braids her hair. Eats a handful of dates. Sips warm beer with honey. She's not fasting for tomorrow. She's nourishing. Because this isn't a funeral. It's a rebirth. You ask her what she'll do after. She doesn't answer. Then, finally, "Whatever I want." She smiles. And in that smile, you see her laugh begin to come back. Just a flicker. But it's there. The chickens would be terrified. The lamp gutters. The cat shifts in its sleep. The night cools gently around you. She lays down her pouch. Ties her sandals loosely. And you realize, this is it. The last night. The end of a chapter you've watched unfold for thousands of words, across temples and markets and scrolls and broken pots and bruised hearts. This is not the end of her life. It's the end of the binding. The knot. The thread that held her in a shape that no longer fits. And now? She breathes out. And you swear, you feel her spirit stretch. Like a linen tunic finally loosened at the waist. Like a papyrus unrolled. Like a name spoken aloud, not as wife of, or daughter of, but just Neferet. She lies down on her mat, pulls the beads close, closes her eyes, not with tension, but with readiness. The temple will be waiting. The elders will listen. The gods will hear. And she? She will speak. Clearly. Softly. Finally. You listen to her breath. The quiet flicker of the oil lamp. The gentle weight of all the women who came before her. And slowly, gently, the world fades into hush. Into warmth. Into rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.